Good afternoon, everyone. Call the Finance Committee in order, please, and ask Mrs. Angela Whitworth. She'd come forward. How are you, Ms. Whitworth?
I am fabulous. Thank you. Appreciate it. Is the mic on, y'all?
It is.
Okay. All right. This is the final version of FY23. I went over 22's final version last month. Gave some highlights. This is the final 23 budget. As signed, all of you need to go thank the governor and the House and the Senate for all the adjustments that were made to our budget. We've had a very, very prosperous session for us. So I'm very appreciative of everything all the chambers did in order for us to get to this place. In the first slide here, you'll see an additional $48.8 million over the excise number that was currently, for a total of a little bit over $2 billion, which you can see is higher than what our amended FY22 budget came in at. The Transportation Trust Fund, which is known as Transportation Trust Fund, which y'all probably known as the fee component previously, had an additional $20.9 million being added for a total of $150.9 million. The rideshare fee had an additional $8.2 million, which brings that to 15.9. That's the Uber and Lyft. And then in state general funds, there was $34.8 million that was put into the budget to really reflect House Bill 511 to break out intermodal due to the transit component. In this next slide here, you can see it's a summary by category for FY23. The first one is capital projects, which makes up 48% of our overall budget. It's the biggest portion of our budget, which consists of our capital programs, which is capital construction, capital maintenance, and local roads admin. Next in line to it is general operations, which makes up 12% of the budget. And that's really where all the people are housed that do keep the department going, like departmental admin, program delivery, data collections, planning, traffic management. Next to it is LMIG, which is roughly 10% of excise, which is 2% ahead of our fiscal year 22 number. Next in line, which is the second largest program we have, which is routine maintenance, which is $461 million, which is 21% of the overall budget. And next to that one is payments to Serta, which makes up roughly 2% of the budget, and that's strictly now like the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank and debt service payments is which makes that up. And intermodal is roughly 2% as well, and it consists of airport aid, transit, rail, ports, and waterways. And you will see this program now being broken back out again. At one point, they were all broken out. We submerged them into one program, and they're all being broken out again in order to be able to track due to transit House Bill 511. Next to that component is the GO bond debt service, which makes up 5% of our budget at $108 million, which is roughly like 2% lower due to decreased debt service payments. And then finally, there's the payments to the ATL, which makes up around 1%. Here on our next slide, you'll see this one is, I'm showing this by fund source, by categories. So you can see overall in GO bond debt service, we had a reduction of $36.5 million due to lower debt service and a fund source and a reduction in motor fuel. The next category is capital construction. In the motor fuel side of the house, you will see an increase of $14.7 million. This enables the department to be able to do additional projects. Capital maintenance, you'll see $85.3 million. Y'all may have remembered in the amended fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 budgets that we replaced these with the COVID relief funds that we were able to utilize. This is just restoring those funds back into the base. And then finally here you'll see in program delivery, data collections. Then you'll see on this next slide, departmental admin, planning, routine maintenance, and traffic management. And these programs primarily consist of all is being reflective of the $5,000 increase in COLA for state employees, the 1 week annual leave payout that is eligible to those employees that are eligible to take it, so they can cash in up to 40 hours of pay. And it also accounts for the employees' pension adjustment for the deferred comp program. And all of these adjustments here are reflective of primarily through personal service type transactions. Also in LMIG, you'll see the increase I talked about of the $4.8 million, bringing that to the $200 million. One thing I will highlight in planning, along with all the COLA adjustments and the personal service adjustments, there was a reduction of $500,000 for the one-time regional planning study that was in that program. And then I've talked about routine maintenance and traffic management, which all consist of those COLA adjustments. Okay, here on the next slide, you'll see is intermodal, and what I'm reflecting here by fund source and how we've broken out. So originally it was all one program. You'll show it intermodal being zeroed out, and then you'll see airport aid, ports and waterways, rail and transit, those programs all being reestablished on the fly. In airport aid, along with the base being established, you'll see a $9 million increase to airport aid. We're working through those projects list as you speak. In ports and waterways, you'll see the base being established, along with the COLA adjustments, annual leave payouts, etc., as well as a 157 one-time teamwork billing adjustment that all agencies received for that. In the rail program, the base was established along with all those COLA adjustments I've talked about previously and teamwork adjustments. There was also an $8 million add for rail improvements to upgrade short line rail lines to Class 2 standards. That's all been reflected in the budget. That was greatly appreciative. There's also a one-time reduction of $75,000 for the Hazelhurst line for railroad clearing that was in the budget last year. And then there was a reduction of one-time funds of $50,000 that was for the Ogeechee Railroad for some rail facility repairs. Lastly on this, you'll see the transit, where there's a combination of the transit trust funds as well as the transit trust fund, which is the fees and the rideshare component. Those combined, there was a one-time reduction embedded within the base for the freight and logistics plan that was put into the budget last year. You see that coming out because that was one-time funding. Also, you'll see highlighted in here is, typical COLA adjustments, annual leave payouts, as well as in the $15.9 million, there's $2.8 million of that that's dedicated for rural transit, and then the remaining $11.88 million is toward different transit initiatives throughout the state. On the next slide, you'll see is payments to Serta that consist of motor fuel and the transportation trust funds. You see them eliminating the motor fuel component there, and you'll see the utilization of the transportation trust, the fees as we've basically known them as for the last few years. You'll see the reduction there, which is primarily due to just a decrease in lower debt service payments and the financing strategy for tolling resilience plan that Serta implemented last year. You'll see the debt common reserve being reduced for that as well. Finally on here, you'll see the payments to the ATL, the increase of $237. That is for them doing all of the COLA adjustments necessary for the ATL. And then lastly, we have a $2.96 million bond that was dedicated to the department to upgrade short lines to Class 2 standards. So with a combination of state general funds of $8 million that was put into the budget, along with the $2.96 million here, the department in the 23 budget got almost $11 million to upgrade Class 2 standard rail lines. Here in a few minutes, you'll hear a presentation from Clement about Intermodal, the program Intermodal, and what's been going on there. So this may be highlighted in some of that as well. That is all for FY23. As I said when I started, we have been very fortunate in this budget request. And like I say, I appreciate everything the House, the Senate, and the Governor did. I want to commend my staff for all their hard work during this session, commend Josh Waller for his dedication through the very end of all of this. So we've been very fortunate.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Just as a reminder for me, can you tell me the source of the Transportation Trust Fund fees?
The fee components themselves was the traditional, the fees or the ride, oh, you want the regular fees? Okay. The Transportation Trust Fund with the hotel, motel, et cetera. But they dedicated in the new Transportation Trust Fund that up to 10% of that could go toward transit.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Oh, Angela, I noticed that on the rail situation, you had $9 million something in there. That's not anything to do with this electric train that Genesis, Wyoming is talking about putting on our track.
No, sir, it is not.
Okay.
It's just trying to bring the rail lines to Class 2 standards, which consist of being able to carry 286,000 pounds and go 25 miles per hour.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I will comment, there's two things that stick out to me over the last several years is how much the LMIG has increased. I remember when it was barely over 100 million, it's 120, I mean, that's 200 million. And also the bond debt payments, how significant they have gone down. So those are two really, in my mind, very important things that have taken place over the last few years. Any other comments? Thank you very much, Ms. Whitworth.
Thank you.
We stand adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Madam Chair, full board, Commissioner. Thank you for the opportunity to present today, give you a recap. I know we've talked about a few of these items, so I won't take longer than necessary. Jump in here, just a reminder of the session calendar. I think one thing of note was if you compared it to the 2021 session, crossover day was about a week later, so that kind of pushed us into that April period and really led to a compressed schedule. And I think one of the things I'll note here is at the end of the night on crossover day, or sine die, there were a lot of bills and items that didn't get taken up. Among them, we had a few, some of the few cleanup items that we had got consolidated in one bill, and we were waiting on an agree. And so it, along with some others, didn't make it at the end of the day. But we're going to be working early next session to go ahead. Nothing was so time sensitive that it can't be taken up early next session. So let me jump into what's pending before. Oh, sorry. Is this better? So jumping in here to the legislation pending for the governor. This first one's actually signed, and that we've talked about before, which is the suspension of the gasoline tax. Governor signed that on March the 18th. Runs through May the 31st. And as you saw in the treasurer's presentation, though, that one of the evidences to the fact that they said that they're going to hold transportation funding harmless is there was no adjustment to the 23 budget. So the revenue collected in what would be fiscal year 22 is appropriated in 23. And so as you see in the budget, there was no change from the governor's estimate on motor fuel. HB 934 deals with the county T-SPLOST, and it was a tweak to the way the law is written today. The state economist establishes an estimate of value of how much should be collected over whatever the period, whether it's 5 or 20 years. And when that amount is collected, the tax ceases. What this does is it allows it to actually last the full period that the voters approve, provided there's an intergovernmental agreement. So it would allow for continued collection should they hit that amount before they hit the date. House Bill 1009, the personal delivery device rules of the road. You see one of those little guys or gals there, a little Amazon Prime delivery. So its goal is to basically establish sort of kind of statewide rules of the road so that you avoid a hodgepodge of local restrictions when you're trying to deploy new technology. If you go back to sort of the state's early autonomous vehicle legislation, we've made a priority in Georgia of wanting to be a proving ground, a great place to demonstrate new technology. So this helps establish some key criteria. One, it has to operate like a pedestrian with the same rights and restrictions. There are specification restrictions in terms of weight, in terms of maximum speed, minimum speed. One of the things we at the department, I got to give our folks in traffic ops and that team a lot of credit for providing feedback that we got back to the author that got incorporated in the bill, was actually maintaining a minimum speed, so it's actually paced the same way a pedestrian walks, because the crossing timings for pedestrian crossings are timed on a certain pace, and so it has to keep that minimum pace. So those type things. There are a few things in terms of the operation. I think that where it's able to operate, that there'll probably be some fine tuning, and we would expect if this is signed into law, they'll come back next year and maybe fine tune based off experiences in communities. Next, pending for the governor's SB 586, which was basically making absolutely clear in state law that local governments have the ability to design build like the department does for transportation projects. It basically is a copy and paste of the department's design build authority. So that'll be available if signed by the governor for local governments to explicitly have that authority to do a design build procurement. Then House Bill 328, municipal right-of-way fees. I'll mention this one in particular because this ties back to something last year when the board went through and took the step of updating decades-old right-of-way use fees. And some of the local governments were pegged, depending on the circumstance, were pegged to the board rule. So one of the things y'all had to do after you adopted the new board rule was grandfather in the local governments because they were still pegged to the rule. This severs them and establishes what their rates are. So this kind of cleans up that last item because y'all set that extension through July of this year. So this now will address that concern. And then House Bill 1372, the call before you dig bill, 811, which I'll talk about, cover a little bit because there's some implementation here for the department. So it's, this bill would require Gdot to locate, well, we locate our 811s through, we locate our underground facilities through called a 511. We'll join the 811 team effective July 1st, 2023. And so that's for locating underground infrastructure, signal, ITS, intelligent transportation systems, cables, and fibers. It underscores in the bill, and we will certainly appreciate the bill sponsor and the folks working with us. It makes absolutely clear the department's not a utility, and that's something that's been a concern over the years. Is they've talked about Gdot being part of 811, is making sure that we are not a public utility, and so we're not going to be subject to the 811 fee structure and not subject to the enforcement of the PSC. Though contractors will not have the ability to call 811 and get those assets located on our right of way, our assets located on our right of way through 811. It does establish sort of a new window. Presently, if someone makes a call to have something located, it's the next, they make the call and then there's 2 business days after that to get it located. This actually allows for early call-in, so it can be a window now of 2 to 8 days. Sort of for the department in terms of the process changes, if we're not able to meet that requirement of getting it located in that time period and an excavator hits an asset, they're held harmless. They're not liable for it. You know, in the run-up to this, we certainly took steps to further streamline our operations with respect to 511. Some of the experiences in that, about 85% of the requests we receive actually don't require a locate, so there's no asset that has to be marked. And then a lot of that work, which will continue to be done, what will happen today is instead of someone necessarily calling 511, they're going to call 811 along with everything else. 811 will contact the department, and then the same folks that we utilize today to locate it will do that location service. So on the roadways, it's our ITS maintenance contractor, and then the vast majority of the signals are located by our district staff. So next, as we look to the summer, 2 things really on the horizon. You know, there's legislation dealing with the resale of electricity for charging vehicles. They did not pass any bills to explicitly authorize the selling by the kilowatt hour because there was a lot of market considerations I mentioned to the board. So we'll have a study committee with four House members, 4 senators, the commissioner. Our commissioner will be on that study committee, as well as Commissioner of Economic Development and the chair of the Public Service Commission. So they're going to look at the broad range of issues around electrification, transportation, probably the funding component and impact, but really looking at across the board, I guess with an eye towards next session, what type of legislation should be, or what, you know, how should they look at that? Really the most The bottom line thing they need to do is be able to authorize the resale of the kilowatt hour. Presently, charges are sold in the state today, but they're done so by you rent a spot. So you're technically not buying kilowatts, you're renting a spot that just happens to have a charger there. And then we expect this ongoing discussion about freight and logistics. So we anticipate, as you know, the state's freight and logistics plan is updated, as the legislative study continues, we'll expect some action over that in the summer, looking into next session. Then here I've got, and you've all been handed about, and so I won't pause too long on these, but here are the road dedications. And as a reminder, both of the two resolutions are pending the governor's signature. And once they're signed into law, you know, the districts will begin the process of fabrication. I got to say that districts 1, 6, and 7, particularly districts 1 and 6, have got a lot of road dedications. So certainly, hopefully, a lot of patience with that process. And then as members of the General Assembly begin setting up their ceremonies, they'll reach out to the districts to coordinate. We'll make those connections again and make sure that they've got the signs fabricated in time to meet the requirements of whenever the legislator is having their ceremony. And I'm stuck. So let's see. Oh, there we go. So last, I don't know if there's any questions on the state side, any state issues. Last very brief item on the federal side is that, and you may have seen some of these emails from some of your local governments and interactions between members of the congressional delegation, but as they did last fiscal year, congressional fiscal year, they're again looking at earmarks, and so they're taking earmark requests. Some of the offices' deadlines have passed. Just want to put it on your radar that Congress is seeming to continue to move forward with the earmarking process, and so certainly if you have any questions or you see anything come through of local governments making requests, commissioner, executive team, where we can be helpful, please just let us know. With that.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Josh, back on the state side of the presentation, that study committee of electrification of transportation, my question goes to the scope of that study. If you're familiar with the scope, do you know if the scope might include the overall impact that this could have on our grid and our overall generation?
I would imagine they're looking, so as they were debating particular bills, I think the reason they came to the conclusion that they needed to do a study committee is there's a broad range of issues. Obviously, not every single aspect is articulated in their resolution, but I think they view a pretty broad scope when they get to meetings to hear from those folks. And I know in terms of the industry, the power generating industry, they've raised those concerns. So I can't help but imagine that when they're participating in meetings, understanding the impacts to the infrastructure will come up and be part of that discussion.
You know, I thank you for saying it that way, because I know since this has been introduced, there's been a lot of folks that are in the industry sector that have been very concerned about this also, and what potential impact that something like this could have on traditional industry.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of those folks were engaged in this conversation. And again, I think that's why it came down to, rather than advancing a piecemeal bill or a tweak here, they said, let's do a broader study committee, because there may be more issues here than we are immediately realizing.
And the personal delivery device, you said laws and rules are to act as if it's a pedestrian. So if I run one of those over, will I be charged with vehicular homicide?
You might not get any more Amazon packages.
That would be okay with me. I mean, what's going to be the penalty for someone when they run those things over?
So I think that would when it goes to court, they would sort of arrive at it. Now, what I can say is the law does require those devices, each of them, to have up to $250,000 in general liability.
In case they run me over.
In case they run you over. Or in case they cause you in swerving to avoid them because they've just run.
Got it. Okay.
Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none,
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Good to be here. I wanted to share with you a little update on the intermodal programs this afternoon. I will start with, happened to be the last time as well. Here we go. The agenda for the update here is, we'll start with the aviation and go through transit, waterways, rail, and the system safety oversight program. With regard to the aviation, let me start with the federal funding. The CARES Act, we divided that into two separate ways we handled the aviation and the transit program. The aviation set some deadlines, and as far as the CARES program goes, we have reimbursed all the funds that was awarded through the CARES program. The CRISA program, we've done good. We were about 93% in terms of reimbursement, and as far as the ARPA program goes, we're about 55%. As far as planning projects go, we have an air cargo study that's going on. The study will focus on identifying emerging trends, what the gaps are, and investment opportunities. We hope to have that closed May of 2022. We also have a airport property inventory study. This is phase one of that study, where we will be looking at sponsors, land ownership, and looking at properties that are on federally obligated locations. And the third project would be the Small Community Air Service Grant Program. Especially with the pandemic going on, there were some small airports that lost passengers, and we're going to look at ways to assist them in attracting passengers in the smaller airports. As far as upcoming planning projects go, two things drive our thinking. One is the joint study that happened this past year, as well as some of the emerging topics and the trends that are out there. So we have identified about 5 different topics. The first one being unmanned air mobility. Hangars have been another a discussion that happened through the joint committee, which we will be looking at. Training, as far as airport managers and the staff that work in the airports. Air carrier investment study is another interesting project that we're looking at as to how we can meet funding gaps. And the last part would be the rates and the charges study. Moving to transit, again, just a summary of federal funding that we received. Transit received a lot more funding than aviation. As far as the CARES funding goes, we're about 73% expended. We have plans to use the rest of the funds as well. And this fiscal year will be pretty robust in terms of administering and distributing the funds. As far as CRISA goes, they have expended all of the funds. That was a smaller amount of $366,000. And ARPA, we are looking at FY 23 to administer the $17 million. Just some other activities with regard to transit. 129 of the 159 counties have urban or rural transit service. There are about 82 rural transit systems with 6 regional, multi-county rural systems. And one important point to note here is 7 counties have had new transit service since fiscal year 2021. So that dropped from 37 to 30. We also have planning projects going on. We have 5 regional transit regional commissions developing plans for their multi-county jurisdictions, as well as a new app, which is an innovative technology that we're working with these regional commissions to help, I would say, cross-jurisdictional transportation. So you could travel across counties with this app and be able to purchase tickets and reach other destinations as well. We also are working on the Rural and Human Services Transportation Plan with the Department of Human Services and Community Health. This will be looking at developing a 5-year update, and we're scheduled to complete that in summer 2022. The intercity bus study is another project that we're working on with FTA funds. There are about 28 bus stops. We will examine the existing transit services and find ways to connect them. Moving on to Waterways. The SHEP dredging project has been completed. I know the Commissioner alluded to this last time we met. Sapple Island Ferry Funding Project, we have $1 million awarded to the DNR through the Waterways program to fund no to low vehicle emission replacement program. The Katy Underwood is an important means of transportation for this island, and so we're working with DNR to look at ways to fund this program as well. Moving on, we also have a ADA wheelchair lift project. The project was awarded in January 2022, and it's expected to be completed in December 2022. Next on to rail. We have about 27 projects across 6 lines over the last 4 to 5 years that we're working on. 250 miles of track improvements and upgrades to make them 286 compliant. Upon completion, I think we will be about 70% with Class 2 286 compliant in terms of our Gdot owned rail lines. We're also developing a GIS database that would have a lot of the information on all of our rail that is owned by Gdot. One thing I did want to note in this slide, in the next slide, is a lot of times we do talk about rail and rail improvements, but seldom bridge and the other assets that go with the rail. We have about we're conducting a rail inspection program at this point. We're at phase 3 of the rail inspection program, inspected about 89 of the 108, and we think that there will be some significant funding gaps in terms of repair and replacement that we have to do, but that would be another main area that we would be focusing on in the coming years. Lastly, the rail safety program. Many of you may know that Gdot has oversight responsibilities as part of the MAP 21 legislation. I wanted to share with you a training accomplishment by 2 of our staff, which is important because this is required as the state oversight entity that our staff be trained. So it's a long acronym, but there are 2 programs that are associated with it. Chet Welsh has completed both training programs, and Ms. Park has completed one and scheduled to complete the next one in later this year. So that's, in a nutshell, my update on the intermodal program. Any questions?
Yes. Can you flip back to the one with the rail? Right there, when you say you're going to improve that rail, what exactly are you doing?
The bullet number 2?
Yes, right there, yes.
There are a lot of different things that we do in terms of just the rail infrastructure, the ballast, the areas around that. We do clearing. So I would be happy to provide you some more details on
Okay.
that.
Okay, just near my home, they're taking up the rail, taking up the blocks going across, and I was just wondering, how often do you do that? And, what's the real purpose behind, doing that?
Removing the rail itself, we don't do that often. I know there was one project that happened recently, and I can get back with you on some more information, but that is not very often.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just supplement that a little bit. Most of this upgrade is with the ballast and the tie replacement. The frequency of that replacement I will follow up on. There's probably a target like we do on bridges and pavements. I'm not sure exactly what that is on rail, but most of these rail lines have had been long neglected. So the money that Angela talked about in the budget and the previous budget years have gone a long way to get to this 286 compliant. It was a good number of years ago where none of it was to 286, which is basically a full rail car, and up to 25 miles an hour. That whopping speed, So we were less than that. But this is a great investment in these state-owned rail lines with private operators on the lines. But most of that work is ties and ballast, and if there's damaged rail, they replace that. But it's usually just those things. Just a comment, as Clement went through in the aviation and the transit of the different federal funding sources, the additional federal funding sources that we've received through CARES Act or CSRA or now the American Rescue Plan Act. He showed some numbers there of, how many contracts have been done in percentages. Each one of those is truly a grant with either a transit operator or an airport. And so those require execution on both entities' parts, which have to get on councils or authorities, commission agendas and approved, and then we work through on our side, a legal review, and then all execute it. So there's a lot of work. It's not simply just pushing a button and then the money's distributed. So I just wanted to commend Clement's team for moving a lot of additional effort over and above their normal jobs to deploy these additional federal dollars that have been very critical, especially in the transit world when nobody was riding transit. And in aviation will certainly impacts, as Clement mentioned, for less air travel and less people getting about. But hats off to the team for administering a lot more volume of work than they've ever had to do with these programs. And hopefully you'll ride the wave and we'll be on the downside of the wave and get back to some more traditional. But they've really stepped up, also in the less than fully staffed. So thank you, Clement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
This technology that Genesee and Wyoming is planning to deploy, it is certainly innovative and potentially revolutionary for the rail industry. And so I think it would be something good to share in the future. We certainly, they have lease rights to our state-owned facilities, of which they certainly, as long as they're compliant with Federal Rail Administration, then we're glad that they're innovating in Georgia. So something we can share with you. It's certainly a different approach to railroading. Thank you.
I will call the Statewide Transportation Planning and Strategic Planning Committee to order. I would like to ask that Matt Markham come to the podium. He is our Deputy Director of the Office of Planning, and he is going to give us a little update on the Scenic Byways, and where we talked and had 2 more scenic highways that were added to our list out of 15, making it now 17 at our last monthly meeting. So I'll give it over to you, Matt, for an update in regards to our rules and regulations.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. It's good to be with you this afternoon. As Ms. Ann mentioned, we did have a presentation to you last month where we brought 2 Scenic Byways for approval by the board. And during that meeting, there were a few questions about the process and how we go about bringing how those get developed and get brought to the board ultimately for approval. So did want to come back to you guys today and provide a little bit of that update on our process for designating a scenic byway. First of all, just as a reminder about the Scenic Byway program, the National Byway program was developed in 1991, and then our Georgia program came along a year later in 1992, was first designated, so about 30 years ago. And as we talked about in the development of them last month, it is designed to designate local roadways or designate roadways to preserve characteristics and qualities of a corridor and enable them to promote tourism, economic development, and really to promote those areas and those qualities in parts of the state that local communities do want to highlight. It is a locally driven process. So local sponsors, local communities, and local governments are those who identify the potential byway. They're the ones who bring those forward to us, recommend them. They complete the application process, and they're responsible for ultimately promoting them and preserving those intrinsic qualities about them once they are ultimately designated and become a scenic byway in the state. It is, again, all about those intrinsic qualities. There are 6 of them. You can see them listed here on the slide. And each byway must demonstrate at least one of those intrinsic qualities. Oftentimes there's more than one, but they do need to demonstrate at least one of those qualities to be eligible to be a scenic byway. The process that we follow, which I'm going to talk a little bit about through the rest of this presentation, does follow program requirements that were adopted by the board, State Transportation Board in 1998. You should have a copy of those in your board books. If not, I have a few printed copies here and be happy to share those with you as well. Those program guidelines do follow the federal highway process for a national scenic byway designation. So the process we follow is the same process that is followed for a national scenic byway designation. And just as a reminder, as we walk through that, the only land use or zoning restriction that is part of a scenic byway designation is the prohibition of any new billboards once a byway has been designated. There are no other restrictions for a scenic byway designation beyond that. Existing billboards are allowed to stay. The only prohibition is on the installation of any new billboards. As you can see on the map, there are 17 byways now after the 2 that were adopted by the board in the last month. There's a total of 17. And just to give a little context around those 17 byways represent 739 total miles in 28 counties throughout the state. And to also provide some perspective about how Georgia's program looks at compared to our neighbors. Georgia has 17 byways. Tennessee, our neighbor, has 13 designated scenic byways. North Carolina has 36, and South Carolina has 21. So just to give you sort of an understanding of how Georgia stacks up with them. So talk a little bit about the process. So while there are many overall steps involved, they can sort of be bucketed into 2 steps, 2 kind of big steps for the process. The first one is a technical review or application. And this really is an opportunity for the local sponsor or those who want to potentially designate a byway to identify that corridor and identify the intrinsic qualities, at least one of those 6 intrinsic qualities I mentioned earlier, and identify and define and describe those. And then Gdot planning, at this point, our planning office will do a technical review of those, that proposed corridor, of those proposed qualities, and then would approve to the next step. The purpose of this is really because it is a rigorous process to ultimately get a byway designated, including a significant amount of outreach and involvement. We do want to make sure before anyone starts that process that their proposed byway would actually meet one of these intrinsic qualities in order to be eligible. We don't want them moving too far down the road and then saying it doesn't actually even meet one of these qualities. So once that that step has been reviewed, we encourage along the way for any proposed sponsor to inform the board, the State Transportation Board member, for where the corridor is located. But we will also inform the board member once it reaches the stage so that you are made aware that there has been a potential byway proposal that is moving into that step to develop the ultimate recommendation. So we do make sure that along the way, the State Transportation Board member for that district is informed and aware. So once that first step has been completed, then we move on into what is kind of the second step, and this is where the real meat of the byway designation process happens. It's called the Corridor Management Plan, or CMP, and this is where again it's locally driven, so the local sponsor is the one who is leading this effort, and they're filling out all of the details now around what is the Scenic Byway designation, what are the goals and objectives of having the byway, how are they going to implement the byway if it were to be designated. It oftentimes involves a committee of local supporters who will be the ones to actually promote the byway once it's done and make sure that the intrinsic qualities are preserved and the byway is being promoted as that tourism or economic development or a local community driver that it's designed to be. And there is, again, a significant amount of public involvement and public information that goes into this process. All residential and commercial property owners along that corridor are required to be notified. That we do require resolutions of support from all the local jurisdictions who are impacted or through whose jurisdictions the corridor would run. So that would be county governments or city governments. We do require letters or resolutions of support from those local governments. Because the only zoning restriction is a requirement on no new billboards, we do require notification to the Outdoor Advertising Association of Georgia, which is the statewide organization overseeing billboard creation and those for the state. So they are required to notify that organization, so they have the opportunity to weigh in and provide input if there's concerns about new billboard locations on commercial property or things like that. And then again, there's a significant amount of public community outreach. At least 2 public meetings are required. We always encourage more. Some of these byways can be 30 or 40 miles long. They could stretch through multiple communities, so we want to make sure there's an opportunity for everyone to be a part of that discussion. So we do require at least 2. They have to post notices in the newspaper of those meetings, record attendees, and all of those things to make sure that so that there is that amount of public involvement, but at least 2. And then also we do, as I mentioned about having support from the board member, we do require letters of board members whose jurisdictions that byway would run through, so that the board members are part of that process along the way as well. So that's the part that the local sponsors are required to work on, and Gdot, from the planning standpoint, is first. We're responsible for making sure all those steps are completed. We make sure that they've provided all of the outreach that they're supposed to. They've documented that. They've let us know all of those steps have been met. We actually submit the notification to the Outdoor Advertising Association to solicit that input. We want to make sure we hear from them and that their input is documented. So while they're required to develop that notice, we do actually send that ourselves to make sure we're getting that response. We also share the information with Department of Community Affairs and Natural Resources. They have significant expertise as it relates to a lot of these intrinsic qualities and have good insight to share with us, so we do want to make sure we get input from them. Assuming all of those steps have been met and they've satisfied all of those requirements, our planning office will then share that information with the commissioner for his concurrence, and then ultimately it gets approved by the State Transportation Board in the same way that you approved the 2 last month. So that's at a high level the steps of the process. There's really no typical time frame for how long it takes. As you can see, there are a lot of steps that are involved that involve the local community's leadership. So really, it depends on how actively engaged they are, how quickly they want to move through. It usually takes around 2 years. That's sort of an average, but again, it could be, much longer or shorter, just depending on how actively engaged the sponsors are and how diligent they are in working through the steps of that process. And lastly, before I'm happy to answer questions if you'd like, just wanted to give you guys a brief update on the status of currently pending scenic byway designations. We have 2 right now, one in Amicalola Falls in Congressional District 9. They have completed the first step, the technical review and application. They completed that last year in 2021, so they are now working on all of those steps that go into the corridor management plan right now. A second one in Newton County, they completed their technical review in 2018, but they haven't done anything towards developing the corridor management plan since that time. So it does not appear likely that is one that's going to continue through the process. But we technically don't have a statute of limitations on when this process can begin or end, and so if they decided they wanted to pick it back up and move forward, they could at that time. But since 2018, there hasn't been any activity, so it doesn't really seem like that one is being actively worked on. So again, I thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer questions. Again, those guidelines are in your board books as well.
Jeff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Matt. That's a really good report. I appreciate that. And I remember us talking about this a few months ago, and you were very helpful then, at least helping me understand some things. But I just want to remind myself through a couple of questions of what I think I remember from last time. But for example, these 2 that are currently pending, while a corridor is in the study stage, I guess you will, to see if it goes to the final designation, does that have the effect of freezing any potential development or zoning on those corridors during the process of consideration?
No, sir. And to be clear, there's no freezing of zoning or process at any point, even after one is designated, except for the new billboards. But that is not in effect while this process is going on.
Well, and that leads to my second question, because you mentioned the billboards, and I think last time I remember us talking about spots could be segmented out of a corridor. I'm curious, when segmentation does happen, is that something that billboard companies would have to ask for during the process of consideration, or do they place some kind of general hold out there for future segmentation? Or how would that work? Maybe you could explain how, if they wanted segmentation, how that would work.
So as you are correct, there is a provision for segmentation within a corridor. And what that would mean is if you had a corridor, say it was 30 miles long, that went through, residential and commercial areas, and there's a portion of that corridor that didn't appear to be part of the intrinsic qualities. It was a different area. You could actually segment that corridor out. And there's a provision in the application process for you to designate to say this portion of the corridor would not be part of the ultimate. Plan.
One last question on that. Could segmentation work if the local jurisdiction does not have the appropriate zoning in place at the current time of the segmentation request?
So
what I mean is, in most areas, in order for a billboard to qualify, the property has to be zoned properly at the point of seeking an application. And if the property is not currently zoned appropriately, will segmentation hold even if that's not the case?
So you mean if a property is not currently zoned to
have
a billboard, but after the board has approved Scenic Byway, could we go back? There is a provision after a Scenic Byway. If the board chose to de-designate a Scenic Byway, you could do that. And it is not my understanding that there's you would hold something in the middle. You could either segment it as you determined to designate it, or afterwards, if you chose to de-designate it.
Yeah, I guess what I was saying is, does proper zoning that would allow billboards have to first be in place in order to ask for segmentation?
There's not a requirement in here. I think you could segment. You have to explain why you would want to segment, but it's not, we would look at that on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, Jamie?
Matt, my concern, I don't see any benefit, financial benefit to any group of people for this. It may, I just don't see it. Now, if you get all of the property owners that are affected by this to sign a document, say they're for it, that's fine. It's easy for me to tell somebody what to do with their property, and I'm not on it. And that's basically what you're doing. And this does nothing, in my opinion, to benefit the property owners that's being utilized as a, quote, scenic highway. And I don't see the benefit of it. I do see how it's detrimental to property owners and property values. And I can't support anything that's, in my mind, is not beneficial to the people who own the property, who bought the property and paid for the property and want to develop it. All of a sudden you make a scenic highway of it. The whole neighborhood's come out against it. Oh no, this is a scenic highway. We don't want it developed and be zoned commercial, but all of a sudden it may get zoned something else. So I don't see any way that that's beneficial to the people who own and have paid for the property. And I just, I may be missing something, but I don't know what it is I'm missing, but I don't support, you can put a sign up that says scenic highway, but I don't see how that benefits the property owners. It helps them in any way. So I'm not sold on the project.
I mean, I will say that's absolutely understood, and I think part of what we've built into these requirements, in addition to the notification of every property owner, it's not the same as support, I do understand, but so whoever wants to sponsor this does have to convince their community, enough of them, that it is of a benefit, and many of them do see that.
Well, you can go get more people to support it who don't own property there. I mean, you can go get, get votes. Oh yeah, but they may not be from that area. But what I want is the people who's affected by this.
And then
I want them to sign a document. I'm fine with this. And if we want to do that, let's do it. But don't let somebody 5 miles from there say, well, I want the scenic bypass over there. Not on my property, but I want it on yours.
The intrinsic qualities do have to be along the byway, so these are qualities that are part of what are along areas that the property is owned. But and again, the local communities that decide to support them, many of them do see a value from tourism or economic development. But I mean, you're absolutely right. You're not going to necessarily please everybody along a corridor, and we do require notification.
But we don't require property owners to sign off on it.
We required them to be notified. We don't require.
Yeah, I got that.
Of the property owners, that's not in the guidelines.
But you can't force somebody to come to a meeting. But if you get them to sign a document, say I'm all for this, yes, you can make my property. But other than that, I wouldn't support it.
I think from Jeff and Jamie, your points are well taken, and I think they're being heard by our group that has been working on this. And I know, Jeff, you sort of stepped up to the mic. Did you want to add something else to your comment?
If you don't mind, I just want to take back off on what Jamie was saying. In the scope of segmentation, as it relates to what Jamie is saying with regard to private property owners on one of these corridors, and I understand that billboard companies can ask for segmentation, but under this current methodology, could individual property owners also ask that their property be segmented out of a corridor if it's tracking to be designated as such?
The local sponsor provides us with what they define as the corridor, and if they wish to segment it, they can.
But that would be
through the local sponsor. We don't have where every individual property owner necessarily directly comes to us to ask for removal. But we do understand that I mean, that could be a potential option if they wanted to segment a piece of it.
So a private property owner would have the option of segmenting out of a corridor if they chose to go to the locals and/or Gdot for such request.
Potentially, again, the local sponsor is the one who's requesting the designated corridor. But, I mean, again, this is designed to be a process that the community supports. If there's clearly not community support, that will definitely weigh in on whether or not the department planning wants to even recommend this corridor to the commissioner to ultimately come before you. I mean, we're not looking to bring forward controversial byway designations. I mean, these are supposed to be areas that have support, that want to attract community involvement, want to attract potential tourism, and so we're not necessarily looking to be involved in something that's controversial.
No, and I understand it, and I appreciate that. I think what Jamie and my concern is sometimes with some of the most well-meaning stuff, there can be some unintended consequences that you don't realize until it's actually a consequence, and I think that's what we're trying to get answers to.
Jamie?
Well, the definition of support is one thing. I mean, who is supporting it? I mean, you can have people on the other side of town supporting, but you can't, the people who are next to it or the owners may not support it. So you may get a large volume of people who say, yeah, fine, put it over there, but don't put it on my property.
Points well taken. Thank you, gentlemen, for that.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Anyway, I appreciate those comments, and I will say in my experience, I have seen a proposed Scenic Byway fail due to some of these comments, but it had also great support as well. But I think most people do involve their stakeholders way before that they apply. But my question is I'm asking specifically about one place, the Richard B. Russell Highway. I think that is a Scenic Byway or not. But my question, though, even if it's not, is what happens when a Scenic Byway 20 years later becomes maybe not so scenic because trees have grown up or something has changed?
So we do have provisions in our guidelines that we can review those byways, and if they're not meeting the continued goals that were met under the original designation, we can go in and have them removed as a scenic byway. There is a provision the board could determine that it's no longer meeting those goals of a scenic byway and de-designate it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to just say that in response to let you know how one of the scenic byways that was passed last month, I was invited to go to the city council meeting for the city of Tybee Island, where David McNaughton was there to make the announcement. Of course, the scenic, as you go out to the beach, is very beautiful anyway. Through this scenic byway that was proposed and passed by us, along there you have your national park that is also involved in that. And the citizens were extremely excited, very supported of what is going on. They're very excited about working forward to get their signage up, to designate that. But it doesn't stop just there with them. What they're doing is now making sure that they come forward and have additional information to give any guest or homeowner in that Tybee Island area information about why this is a scenic byway, and letting points of interest be noted so that you can pick up a pamphlet or other information and get some guidance as to why that was proposed and supported so very much by their community. So I just wanted to share that experience with you. They intend to have another celebration and an announcement following the one that was made at the city council meeting just recently. And I might ask Dana if you have any response with the Douglas. Yes.
So the Douglas County group is also planning a ribbon cutting and a big celebration. They too were very excited. He came up to me after the meeting with nothing but thank yous. and, you know, wanted to make sure that I would avail myself to the ribbon cutting and the celebration that they were having later this spring.
So I just wanted you to know how I knew how the community in my area had responded and the support that was there. But going back, and Dana did the same thing and sharing with you her experience, but going back, I know every one of us aren't the same. Every project is different. So we'll continue to be very cognizant of what is being said here today. And I appreciate those comments very much from both you gentlemen as well as from our chair. Are there any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, may I have a point of privilege?
Yes, sir.
So as Matt mentioned, there is a board rule in and around Scenic Byways. So at your pleasure or at your recommendation of this committee, those can be revisited should the board feel compelled to revisit or adjust or modify. We'd have to make sure it's still compliant with the federal requirements, but that always is an option as well. I think he said the vintage was 1998, and all of you were here back then. Just kidding. None of you were, I don't think. And so that's certainly an option, and also your other option is too, you have a vote. So this board takes action, so it's the pleasure of the board to advance these. I would, as each board member though is involved initially, as Ann and Dana have just articulated of great support from their community, they had that. You may not have it in the future. I guess, and just the last commentary part is, by perspective, you heard the numbers of our surrounding states, and it's pretty rare that scenic byways just don't pop up very often. So we've got two in the hopper that's been sitting there for a while. So I'm not sure about the urgency, but we're always welcome to for you to review board policies and help give us as staff direction and guidance, and we make sure it's compliant for your approval. So I'll just put that as out for your thought and consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other comments? Seeing then, thank you, Matt, so very much, and this committee stands adjourned.
Okay. Oh, there it is. All right. So I have one action for the committee today. It's to present the amended and restated joint resolution between Gdot and Serta for the SR 400 project. The reason it's amended and restated is this is a joint resolution that the board had already passed in December of 2019, basically authorizing the SR 400 project and the relationship between us and Serta. Again, as was previously prevented, that project has shifted a little bit to be a revenue risk. So the reason we're amending the joint resolution is just to reflect that change in the project. I'd note that Serta's board approved this on April 4th. So I'm asking for the committee's favorable approval for consideration for the full board tomorrow. That's it. If the committee, usually the committee votes to take it to the full board tomorrow, just for favorable approval.
Matt, has the committee seen the joint resolution?
It should have been included in the.
I mean, I got it, but did the rest of the committee get it?
Yeah, it should have been included in it.
Okay, great. So, before we take the motion, let's just see if there's anyone on the committee or anyone on the board have any questions related to the resolution. No? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve and take it to the board tomorrow. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, the motion passes.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're 4 seconds over, Matt. Okay, great. Well, this concludes the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we'll just move right into the committee of the whole. Today, we're going to hear several things, but the first one, we're going to hear the District 7 update with Paul Denard, our District 7 engineer, sorry.
All right. I think we're good to go. Well, Madam Chair, members of the board, Commissioner, thank you for the opportunity to present today on a status update for Gdot District 7. I'm Paul Denard, the district engineer. To begin, I'm excited about the opportunity to share with you the successes and hard work and really just get a chance to brag on the amazing staff that we have at District 7. We are the smallest district and one of the busiest, and today I want to focus on just some of the highlights from various sections in the district as it relates to customer service and some of the key projects that we're doing, and I will wrap up with some highlights from our maintenance section. District 7 serves 47 city and county governments with a total population of 3.1 million, and this is approximately 30% of the population of the state of Georgia. There are 985 centerline lane miles and 4,000 lane miles of state route, which is the least of all the districts. However, of the 188 million vehicle miles traveled in the state routes across Georgia, District 7 has the most vehicle miles traveled of all the districts, and that being about 56.8 million. And that's nearly 30% of the VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, in the state. So what does that mean? That means that we get a lot more wear and tear on our roads, and I get a lot more phone calls, and there's a lot of activity in District 7. So, and we also have currently serve the pleasure of 5 congressional districts, so 5 of the board members with our 6 counties. District 7 has a lean team of about 205 district employees that serve 6 sections and 3 area offices. As you can see by our numbers, we're experiencing the challenges many in the transportation industry have with turnover, retirements, job changes, etc. And we have a younger workforce with just over 50% of our staff having 6 or less years of Gdot experience. So filling our vacancies and retaining our team members is a top priority. This has shown us the value of the recruitment efforts, the retention efforts, and training initiatives, as well as that $5,000 cost of living adjustment being so vital to sustaining the numbers within our district and really helping to build the careers of our employees and keep them here and around for a while. So despite the challenges, we are here to handle our business. And with that, the commissioner has always stated, matter of fact, first day of the job, he stated that Atlanta is a world-class city. And as such, responsiveness and customer service has always been one of our core values. In fiscal year 22, since July, we've received over 1,900 customer inquiries, formal customer service inquiries that you insert on the website, and that includes traffic signal requests, construction project issues, maintenance issues. And this happens to be 60% of all of the inquiries that we receive statewide as a department. And so this averages about 10 inquiries a day. And the reason why I brought this up to you is because I wanted to highlight even just the young lady or the woman there on the screen, Miss Clarice Boone, as well as Miss Chastity Crawford. They're the front line. They're the face behind all of the activities going on at the district. And they've been answering our phone calls and really started as that front door for a lot of our issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
On the previous slide you showed, with those 119 vacancies?
Yes.
Where are those vacancies?
So it's all across maintenance. We have 6 sections of maintenance department, pre-construction, traffic operations. It's all throughout the district. We're primarily in the maintenance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there's been a couple of initiatives that have occurred that we've done, boosting the salaries from $950 to $1,250 that have encouraged and helped out in those initiatives. And then we're working with our Geo HR department on recruiting online, Indeed.com, all kinds of initiatives to get our maintenance staff up and running.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right, where are we? All right, so with that, zooming out, development is booming here in Metro Atlanta. As you probably see, just looking out outside, that wasn't there 2 years ago. One means of customer service in our traffic operations office is how quickly we're able to work with private and public entities who request making modifications to the state route. This fiscal year, we processed 165 driveway permits, and that's everything from a right turn lane that goes into a Walmart to, as you can see in the picture there, the South Fork Conservancy's Peachtree, North Fork Peachtree Confluence Pedestrian Bridge. Traffic Operations is also partnered with MARTA to complete 87 new bus stops since January of 2021 across the metro region. Every permit is unique and the design is based on land use. But the good thing that I want to bring up to you is that the average completion time today is 53. 2 years ago, that number was over 100. So our team is doing an amazing job cutting that time where we can improve the customer service and get our permits turned around. And then driveways aren't the only permits that we issue in large quantity. For every project and permit, we receive multiple permits adjusting or modifying the existing utility infrastructure. In fiscal year 21, we issued over 2,600 utility permits, which is about 25% of the permits statewide. These permits actually are processed much faster because of the narrower scope. It's a utility. It's typically a line. And we were able to decrease our processing time from 9 to 3 days. So they're doing an amazing job over in our permitting section. In pre-construction, they're engaged with many internal Gdot customers to ensure that projects keep moving to the letting. Our right-of-way and survey teams have been working diligently to keep up with baseline schedules. Despite slowdowns, you can see the numbers for our right-of-way section are significantly higher since fiscal year 21 into 22 because the courts are reopening again. And you can see that our surveyors had astounding work done, surveying 150 parcels and over 6 miles of roadway length for various projects. And then our district design team is currently working on 12 active projects, which includes 3 roundabouts. And just to highlight here, this is State Route 14, Roosevelt Highway at Washington Road. We're accepting and getting these projects because this allows our younger engineers to get these smaller intersection projects and really get a handle on what they're doing from a design perspective, and it increases that training opportunity for some of our more experienced to teach the younger ones. District construction is hard at work with inspection, project management, and oversight of all the construction projects in the district. Our district has 93 active construction projects with a total of about $435 million worth of work going on. And as mentioned before, to meet our workforce challenges, our leadership team is bringing together in-house and consultant staff to conduct structured field and classroom training. And we recently had a project engineering training that really helped us get to the technical skills of what actually you're going out there and inspecting from a construction standpoint, as well as the soft skills of negotiating with the contractor. So it allowed all of our youngest CE2s to really get in the room and get that training going. And also I would like to highlight for the first time in in a while, I'll say about 4 years, that we're below the target of 114 business days for project closeouts. Lowering our project closeout number helps us close the financial books on Gdot and local projects so that we can reallocate the resources to newer projects and streamline our workforce in the district construction team. So now let's get into the key projects within the district. These are there's a lot of them, but not here, just a few of them I'm going to show today. This is State Route 92, and this project, yes. This project is about 95% complete. The commissioner knows. We've had a lot of conversation about those. It's a new alignment for State Route 92 that is open. It is open, and that bypasses the downtown area and resolves the crossing issues that we had downtown at Old State Route 92 and Campbellton Road. With an underpass that you can see right there that is currently on. This project had extensive coordination with local communities, elected officials, the railroad, and the city, and is expected to be fully complete later on this year. So I will be so glad to get to that point, and we're looking forward to it. These are some more pictures of that project. This project at I-75 and I-285 on the south side is an interchange project just south of the International Terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson and creates a collector-distributor lanes to resolve some of the weaving issues and concerns with regular commuting traffic and a lot of the freight traffic that was headed towards 285, or that is headed towards 285. This project was completed back in the winter of 2022, and it is working great out there. I don't know, I'm sure everybody has probably been through or near or around that interchange. It's phenomenal, the work that they did out there. This project actually consists of two projects delivered simultaneously to widen State Route 9 from 2 to 4 lanes approaching and through the city of Alpharetta's downtown area. It adds medians, turn lanes at key intersections with pedestrian accommodations and a multi-use trail and upgraded traffic signal. So this project is scheduled for completion in spring of 2024. This minor project, just northeast of Stone Mountain Park, is an operational improvement project. It's one of the smaller projects, and just because it's a small project doesn't mean that it doesn't have a big benefit operationally from a safety perspective. This aligns the ramp terminal. You can see that where the old ramp kind of is, where the dirt is, it realigned the ramp to meet Hugh Howe and eliminated a really bad weaving section between the ramp and a closely spaced intersection that's just off of the page. This project was completed this past January. And finally, this smaller intersection project reconfigured a 4-leg intersection into a multi-lane roundabout at Browns Mill Elementary School and Browns Mill Recreation Center, basically to assist pedestrian activity, install rectangular rapid flashing beacons to help students in the community navigate to the recreation center. And I'm a big fan of roundabouts. They significantly increase safety, especially, and serve as a gateway sometimes in some of these residential areas and communities. So this project was completed in spring of 2021. In the same vein, in recent years, we've noticed an increase in pedestrian injury and fatality crashes in our district. And statewide, there were 79 in 2019 pedestrian crashes and fatalities, rather. And then in 2021, there were 143. So District 7 has placed a focus on addressing pedestrian safety in our quick response program. So traffic operations continues to program a variety of safety improvements. In the screen, you see a project that on the left is State Route 8 at Lindley Middle School in Cobb County, where a crossing guard fatality occurred. And the other picture shows a pedestrian hybrid beacon on State Route 9 at Elizabeth Way in downtown Roswell near a transit stop with heavy pedestrian traffic. So we're looking to try to address some of those pedestrian concerns, crossings near transit stations with our quick response programs. And we have some other projects also on Terra Boulevard that are going to do the same thing. Maintenance is a critical function in our district that we tackle with in-house Gdot staff, service contracts, and the ITB RMR's invitation to bid rapid maintenance response projects. So it takes a combined effort, with some of the challenges we face. But as you can see by the chart, we budget and plan for a variety of types of work, from sound wall repair to fencing to bridge repair, you name it. This is what we're going to cover as a part of our maintenance response. This fiscal year, our maintenance team had about 32 ITBs and 14 RMRs completed, with that totals out to be about $12 million of investment. Pavement preservation is one of our top priorities in the district maintenance budget. As shown in the previous slide, it consists of all the work, 37% of it has been spent towards pavement preservation. And just this year alone, we've put down about 2,000 tons of asphalt, 20,000 pounds of cold patch, which takes care of those spot areas, and then 60,000 pounds of hot patch, which covers the more longer stretches of roadway, like in the right side of the picture. And we've also been focusing in on PCC slab repair as well with our ITV program. Gdot is responsible for all signage on state routes, and we prioritize regulatory and signage, as you see here, like the do not enter sign, and making sure that those signs are up. And highly visible signs, like the interstate directional sign that you see there. Our crews have been focusing on the graffiti, like you see there, and warning signs on curb ramps, wrong way signage as a critical feature, because we believe that addressing the signage is a good way to address the operations and safety as a low-hanging fruit. And then finally, here are some other activities showing our maintenance crews at work. We do vegetation management, shoulder bearing, fence repair, and guardrail. There's just so many things that we do, and just hats off to the team that as they go about their work on a day-to-day basis. Another exciting part of our work is to partner with local agencies on special events. I'm sure everybody remembers last year, District Traffic Operations and Maintenance worked together with Cobb County and the City of Atlanta to ensure 2 parades were executed and removed with minimal impact to peak hour traffic. This work was planned and permitted in 4 days. 4 days to do that. It was the team was great, the coordination was great, and we can see the results right here. But in the same vein, emergency response has really become the norm for our maintenance teams lately. When I first started as district engineer, we had 4 major trip incidents in under 3 weeks. These are with tractor trailers turning over on the freeway, and I was like, is this what the job is really all? but it happens. And just 2 weeks ago, a plane crash landed on Cobb Parkway. Thankfully, the pilot walked away and no one was hurt, but Gdot had literally, it was just a minor sign repair after all of that. But regardless, we stand ready to address anything that comes our way. So again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share some of the great things happening in District 7. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have anything that comes across your desk.
Ms. Lemon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am one of those 5 congressional districts that lies within District 7, and I will say to you that Paul and I have become fast, close friends. He cries sometimes when he sees my number come across his phone.
On Saturday.
Especially on Saturdays and late at night, about 8:30, 9 o'clock. But he's always very responsive. He's always very professional. And every now and then, I'll feed him to see if I can get more stuff from him. That is the trick. But all seriously, Paul does a wonderful job with the very limited staff that he has, Mr. Commissioner, and we really need to give them some additional support. I know that everybody's struggling with this issue of staffing, but we all know what happens in the city of Atlanta. As soon as they replace the guardrail's down again. As soon as they replace the sign is down again. And so my heart breaks for these employees who are out there working so hard to try to make sure that safety remains first priority, but we need help. They need help because they're doing a great job, but we've got to find a way to get them some help on the maintenance side especially, because if safety is our priority, we've got to put our money where our mouth is. And again, Paul does a wonderful job managing the resources. The staff does a wonderful job, but we've got to get them some help.
Thank you, Ms. Lemon. Mr. Boswell?
I just want to piggyback what she said, because I've had opportunity to contact Mr. Denard, and he is very on top of it as far as response, and his knowledge is incredible. So I want to thank you publicly for how you have responded to my questions to you and some issues we've had in your district. And thank you very much.
Ms. Key?
Yeah, I want to echo as well. Unlike Ms. Lemon, he doesn't cringe when he sees my number. come across. He welcomes that when he gets those calls from me, because he says how excited he wants me to call him more often. But he, in terms of being responsive, Commissioner, he does an outstanding job. He really is. And, you know, the city of Atlanta and the 5th Congressional is a bit challenging in lots of ways. And Paul has clearly stepped up to the challenge. I've heard great feedback from our state representatives, our senators. I mean, just all saying good things about the responsiveness and the work that the department is trying to do. But resources is key, and I know you're not the only organization that's having that resource challenge, but again, we really do have to figure out a way to get more resources to the table to support the efforts that we do. But Paul, job well done. You just do a great job. Thank you, and I truly appreciate all that you do for the 5th Congressional.
Appreciate it, and I'll say it is a team effort. It is a team. We have an outstanding team in District 7.
Not leave me out. In District 4, he does an outstanding job in taking care of those issues over there as well, and it's very much appreciated. And if you're 119 staff short, you've got that's a problem that needs to be solved. And I hope that the commissioner will work with you and get that done. Thanks.
Well, if I don't say anything, you're not
Okay.
going to answer my phone. How many more districts are there? Paul, thank you for everything. Paul gave me a ride up SR9 from 285 all the way to the end of to the county line, showing me the many projects and things going on in District 6, and I really appreciate everything, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, there's a big echo in this room, but I will continue it. I want to tell you I'm very impressed with what you do with your resources. I think the people in my district, we think about things a lot more before we start moving things around. And that's not the case down here. I think y'all are moving so fast, but I also want to commend our board members that work under you. I cannot imagine how many things go on and how many calls that you do get, and I thank you for your work as well. So, but thank you for a very good and comprehensive report and the work you do.
Thank you for the opportunity. I will say I'm well supported by the staff there at District 7, and then Commissioner and the team and Brad, and let us know. Call me if you need me.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, Andrew Heath, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Commissioner. Last month, we talked a little bit about the bipartisan infrastructure law, and I gave an overview of the new bridge formula program that's included in that legislation. This month, we're going to continue our tour of the new law, highlight 2 new programs that are included in the legislation, specifically the new carbon reduction program and the new protect program. This is a relatively short presentation, but just designed to give you guys some information as to what are the criteria, the eligible uses of the funding contained within these programs. So as we are all asked about potential uses and things of that nature, we've got that information armed and ready to go. Just as an overview of the bipartisan infrastructure law, it's probably most simple to think of it as 4 major categories contained within that legislation, 4 buckets, if you will. One is the plus-ups of the existing formula programs. Second bucket, new formula programs. That's where we're going to focus our time here today. Third bucket is the discretionary grant programs, a number of new grant programs that's coming out of USDOT and Federal Highway. And the fourth bucket is the policy or regulation side of the new law, and we continue to see new guidance come out of USDOT and Federal Highway as they work to implement this large piece of legislation. So getting into the new carbon reduction formula program, the purpose of this program is to provide funding for projects to reduce transportation emissions or develop carbon reduction strategies. You can see the size of this program on your screen. It's a $6.4 billion program over the life of the legislation across the country. What that translates to for Georgia is about $40.5 million a year apportioned to our state for the program. It is apportioned by formula, so there's USDOT publishes a formula as to how those dollars are distributed. But a key point in this particular program is that 65%, or the majority of the program, is directly sub-allocated to geographic areas based on population. So think of your MPO areas as example. They receive direct sub-allocation of this apportionment within the program. I'll get a little bit more into that here in the next slide. So some eligible uses of what carbon reduction money can be used for: traffic monitoring, management, or control, bike ped type projects like on and off road trail facilities for non-motorized uses, advanced transportation congestion management technologies, ITS. We've talked a lot here in this forum about what we're doing from a navigator and TMC perspective. A lot of that work is eligible for this program. Street lighting, energy efficiency, transportation demand management, and a host of others that are specifically listed out in the legislation as to what we can direct those dollars to. So just as an example, we have an ongoing connected vehicle program within the department where we talk about what we would like to do through that program through what we call our roadmap. The projects that could arise out of that roadmap would be an eligible use for carbon reduction programs, or the carbon reduction dollars. Some of the key provisions of this program: we are required to develop a carbon reduction strategy under this program. And that strategy has to be developed within 2 years of the enactment of the legislation, so that clock is currently ticking. And it has to be done in consultation with the MPOs and submitted to US DOT Federal Highway for their approval. What needs to be included in that strategy are our specific efforts that we will undertake to reduce emissions and identify specific projects and strategies that would enable that to happen. Now, US DOT Federal Highway can approve that or not approve and have essentially identified deficiencies. However, the law is silent as to what that exactly means. So we are expecting some guidance out of them as they, again, work to implement this legislation. Now, getting back to that allocation piece, as I mentioned, the carbon reduction program is 65% sub-allocated. So actually, the majority of the dollars is spread out across these geographic areas, specifically urbanized areas. So think of your MPOs across the state, and then other rural areas as well are specifically called out for that sub-allocation piece. And Gdot has to coordinate and consult with the local governments and with the MPOs in those areas as we work to apportion those dollars across the state. The remaining amount, the 35%, what that translates directly under the department's control is $14.1 million per year under the carbon reduction formula program. Now, switching over to the PROTECT formula program, when you think of PROTECT, you can think about resiliency. What PROTECT actually stands for is promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation. So think about projects that could enable response for emergency situations, can help mitigate the results of extreme weather, things of that nature. That's where we want to try to direct these dollars to. Again, the purpose: planning resilience improvements, community resilience and evacuation routes, and at-risk coastal infrastructure. Again, a fairly large program, $7.3 billion over the life of the legislation across the country. What that translates to is $46 million per year that's provided to Georgia, apportioned by formula. So PROTECT is a little bit different, where the legislation is actually fairly silent on eligible uses for this money. It's actually quite broad. We can apply PROTECT dollars for any highway project eligible for assistance under Title 23. So really kind of, you name it, it's eligible under the legislation. Any public transportation service eligible for assistance under Title 49, or specific improvements around port facilities, and you can see some of those listed there. However, we have seen language come out of US DOT Federal Highway highlighting things like the strengthening and protecting of evacuation routes and increased resilience of transportation infrastructure. So we're awaiting some further guidance as we're going to expect that as they look to really sort of direct how they expect this money to be invested. But just as an example, projects along our evacuation routes as highlighted here would be a prime use for dollars under this new program. Some key provisions: there are some tenets in the legislation that restrict use a little bit. May not use more than 40% of funding for construction of new capacity under this program. However, that means you could do resurfacing, things of that nature of these specific routes. And may not use more than 10% of funding for planning activities. meaning that at least 90% has to go to construction related activity. There are some provisions that allow us to obtain a reduced federal match, which is good news for us, and something that we will definitely look to take advantage of. We can reduce the match requirement by 7% by developing a resiliency plan for the state and incorporating projects into that plan that would provide a improved match for us of up to 7%. And then an additional 3% if that plan is subsequently incorporated into our long-range plan. So that 7% and 3% is additive, which would allow us to achieve a 90-10 match for this program, which is good news. That does include planning activities, systemic approach to resiliency, and risk-based assessment of vulnerabilities of our infrastructure. And then finally, the PROTECT program does have some discretionary programs that are housed within it, an additional $1.4 billion to states, but this is a discretionary application-based process. So if we want to take advantage of these dollars, we would need to develop an application to the Notice of Funding Opportunity to try to leverage some of those dollars and bring them to Georgia for a specific project. And these programs have very specific criteria that are outlined in law for us to respond to. So planning grants around resiliency and resilience improvement plans, or design development of data tools to simulate transportation disruption. So think about emergency situations or extreme events of some sort. But then also resilience grants for resurfacing, reconstruction, improvement of existing facilities, upgrading existing service transportation, mitigation of floodwaters, improving drainage. You can see those things listed out here. A great example, this was State Route 24 in Washington County when Hurricane Sally came through. We had that wash out of that roadway. A project to mitigate this type of thing from occurring would be a great response for this type of discretionary program. So that's it. That's the two new programs, Carbon Reduction and Protect. I hope this was some good information for you guys, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. And we look forward to hearing more when you get the more specific instructions as well.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I will call Mark Mastrononi up for a construction delivery cost update.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Commissioner. I'm hoping there's some leftover love that you showered Paul with. Give that to me, if you will.
Of course, there always is.
It may be needed. I welcome the opportunity to come before you and give you an important, albeit somewhat sobering presentation on construction costs. Some of you have had some preview of this. I think Mr. Bowen, he did me the favor of stepping out, and I know Ms. Ann swore herself to secrecy. We discussed some of this last night. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to detail some influences that are affecting the market. I'm also going to show you some of those impacts through data, and then also as well share some steps we're taking as an agency to try to mitigate these impacts. And a little over 2 years ago, we were introduced to a name of a disease called the coronavirus. And we all quickly learned a lot of impacts arose out of that. Some still remain, certainly in the supply chain area, very specific to industrial levels of production. And that still reaches us today. A lot of things have recovered, but there are elements that still is a factor driving up cost. We do have our own real experiences with labor, and all jokes aside, that vacancies in the agency. Today, I want to focus on the cost element of labor. Labor as an input has increased. That too materializes back to us in our lettings. And then the newest one, that's really one that probably it's got its intuitive thoughts as to what it has impacted us on. I'm going to elaborate a little more on what really is at play. Fuel is that intuitive one that has come to us, but I'll share with you that steel is probably equally disrupted, if not in a greater sense. And to give you some detail to this, we heard early on at the onset of the war, a lot of targeted bombing in Mariupol. So in preparing for this presentation, I did a little bit of research to try to understand the steel market impacts. Mariupol was once home to the world's largest steel manufacturing. It is no longer that today, but still a very significant plant existed, and I'll use that in the past tense, in Mariupol. There were some strikes yesterday to really level it to the ground, essentially. And why that's important, and I bring that up, is the United States imports, and as of last year, 66% of its pig iron from Russia and Ukraine. Now, pig iron is that first product after those materials have been mined and have gone through the blast furnace. That becomes the basis of things that become steel products for us. So emphasize, 66% of what we brought in came from those two countries. Those two countries are the third and the eighth largest producers. We sit in the number 6 spot. But what this means for us is, as well, on the global piece, this is that macroeconomics lesson we didn't ask for. On the global piece, they also represent a combined total of 65% of that production. So it's not just what we import, it's that global loss that exists. So offline immediately is Ukraine, and then by sanctions and other reasons to not support Russia's activities, that Russian metal is also offline. So I'll say that to say this, if it ended tonight, the Ukrainian contribution towards the steel market is largely non-existent for some great time. And that is a very real impact to the globe and us here in Georgia as well. We don't enjoy any escape from that. So again, I was looking for that carryover love. I was hoping you guys still had some. I see I'm doing appetite control now. So I'll jump into some letting impacts, and I'll shift it over to asphalt for a second. And I'll remind you, I made a presentation to the board years ago. One of the last things refined from a drum of crude is asphalt, liquid asphalt cement. So however goes a barrel of crude, so goes liquid asphalt cement. And so if you look at the table here, and you'll see this is a 1 mile, 12-foot wide section of pavement. This is the cost that we've seen trending over the past 3 years. And I'll make a shout out to our folks in engineering services. They're very supportive of us in developing estimates for work, as well as reviewing contractors' bid, and they take this data and they put it together for us to make informed decisions about things we have to progress as an agency. But I'll draw your attention to the top blue line there, and I'll give you the math on that. From last year, again, this is all of last year to March of this year, roughly $85,500 a mile. Now it is north of $100,000 a mile. That's a 19% increase just to do simple resurfacing. To say that another way, that's a 19% increase to maintain our assets with resurfacing. Those are very real impacts to us as an agency. We asked those folks to dig a little deeper, and I apologize, I recognized this earlier. I don't have a title to the top of this, but this is March of 21 to March of 22. They track these prices quarterly. There's a distinction there in the blue rows of being prices per district, and they're grouped together. And additionally, items are grouped together. These are very common items that we see priced for us. I'm only going to pick out a few of them. The first one I'll emphasize, again, we just spoke about asphalt. That far right column is the number of uses in that period of time. So we had over 1,100 projects, or 1,100 times one of those line items appeared in the contract over the past year. And so if you look at the percentage, you could interpret District 1, 6, and 7 potentially as somehow an anomaly. I'll tell you what that really is that some of that work is not let in that period of time, right? So there's not an input there to compare. But look at the other remaining, and this is a grouping of our smaller aggregate-sized asphalts to our larger aggregates. As a grouping, let's call it 40% is an increase. So again, I told you that cost per mile. Now I'm telling you that asphalt that gets put in all of our projects in other ways, just to make, not just the resurfacing, but to build that new road or to widen that road. If I could, I'd like to draw your eye down the page a little bit to bar reinforcing steel. And if you look again across the districts, there's a little variation to where that is. But, you know, ballpark that at 30+% is that steel translation that's coming across as an increase. And these are bid numbers. These are numbers that are coming in from our contractors. These aren't something we're estimating. These are real numbers we're digging out of those bids we collect. And so again, it goes further down. pre-stress, it says bridge beams PSC. PSC is a pre-stressed concrete beam. So now I have the component in that composite structure of concrete as well as reinforcing strand steel. And reinforcing strand is an item that has seen increases as much as 300%. That's also our cable barrier that we install. So these are inputs for us to learn and recognize and manage a little expectation on what things we might be delivering. We might look at tempering our path forward. So again, there really isn't a lot of good news in this other than to tell you that it's very real, right? And I'm going to go on to another one, and I apologize just for to be able to be legible. I had to copy the upper portion of that same section. But I'll bring you down to where you see the to the bottom grouping there. Bridge beams, PSC, box beam. A box beam is generally a fairly low cost, quick construction item. These are the projects we want to push out, help the locals with single span type work. Very quickly you recognize there's one there that has a favorable number, and it's 3.95% savings in districts 2 and 3. I can't explain that, but I'm more struck by the fact that you're going to see 86% increase on the cost of that beam. That's an element of the project. That's not the project. That's an element thereof. I'm still looking for that love. I'm losing you. I can feel it. It's not going well. Again, and I don't want to belabor these points, but I do want to share this with you and give you some time to look at it for yourselves. If you'll see the red coating in the middle of the page, that is concrete flat work. And so one of the things that we're experiencing, and I'll say this, I have the opportunity to speak with contractors on an associate level, on an association level, on individual levels, vendors, suppliers, had a lot of tough conversations in the past 6 to 9 months. We as an agency, some the chief and I, some the commissioner and I, some the three of us together. That input there is probably largely driven by labor, and as well as there's a reality with the delivery of cement trucks, delivering cement to the ready-mix plant, and then the ready-mix driver's availability. So again, these are inputs that where some things we might hope to return. Some of these things have been lingering for a while and continue. On this page, I will draw your eye. These are very fresh numbers. Storm drain pipe. This is concrete pipe with a welded steel mesh inside of it, a welded wire inside of it, reinforced concrete pipe. One of the most consumed items that we put in our roadways for drainage systems. Met with those folks recently, and you have to appreciate this, and actually, if I put this in perspective, it really translates to all that a contractor does. They're in control of the equipment and the labor. But for that pipe production, somebody produces the aggregate, somebody produces the cement, somebody produces the steel. And so we have panic pricing, we have fear pricing. And then we have a little bit of a grapevine scenario. If I tell you I'm worried about it, now you're worried about it, you're giving me a price for something that might go in the ground 2 years from now. And I can't guarantee you a price, I won't guarantee you a price. You're going to mark that up to try to protect yourself. I can't tell you not to, and I wouldn't discourage that. But the reality of that pricing is, however that's compounded, it begins to artificially inflate the market. But these folks are suffering from supply chain issues where cement manufacturing is for different reasons, it goes offline every year for plant maintenance, but it's compounded with the massive demand. I think as Paul mentioned, you look around, there's several of these buildings that have gone up, just the concrete demand necessary to build commercial places. If you look at the other elements of residential construction, all those demands, the similar things we share in that market space for highways, there's a tremendous volume that is requested. And so folks are unable, they might have the resources to produce the product, but they are missing a component to go forward. And so that causes that concern for how can I give you a price for the future. So so that hits us on the front end at the lettings. These are the numbers are reflecting what we receive in bids. And then there's the reality of the work that's already underway. And this is where a lot of the tougher conversations come in. So with our federal aid projects, we don't have the ability to jump in and participate in covering those escalated costs. That's prohibited. So if you bid a project, and it's not uncommon for us to have projects 2.5, 3 years long, you gave me a price in the best of times. I'm going to steal from the commissioner. I heard him say this yesterday. You gave me a price in the best of times, and now you're going to build it in the, quote, worst of times, at least economically for yourself. Those are real pressures where the work is not profitable. The material has eclipsed what they thought it would cost. The labor has gone up. Our prices that they bid for us have held. Those are very tough conversations. A lot of those folks, it certainly is a market to take risk to make profit. You have good times and bad times. You have a long extended period of bad times, and that's not an enjoyable piece for the owner either. These are very real concerns for us to sustain the program we have and to be measured in what we do as an agency. And so for the contract impacts, those conversations of cost escalation have reached us where they have told us, they have detailed, showed us invoices. Here's the price that I'm being told today. And we have a very unfortunate position to take that we don't have the ability to participate in that. What we have the ability to do where it's a supply chain disruption is we can actually forgive that time. We can actually extend that contract. If that's tied to what we call the critical path, or it's controlling the completion of the work, we don't put them in a double jeopardy scenario where we accumulate liquidated damages. That's a little relief when you're paying 200% increase on a product. But it is something we can do, and that we are doing pretty commonly these days. The several items that we're hearing, I met with a vendor week before last who is depending on steel mills for product. He's been told his lead time is 18 months. He's got work he's committed to deliver this year. He's trying to figure out where else he can go to get that material. He's spending additional money to go and get it. But again, this is a little bit like that supermarket run on items that are in short supply. There's a run on a lot of those steel market items and those mills. So for contract impacts to those active projects, we really are trying to do our best to recognize where we might be able to relieve a little bit of time. It's anybody's guess when the market will recover, but if it's the appropriate thing to do, we'll do that. The challenge in that is we really do still desire to build those projects and build them efficiently. We don't want to have the public be put through something they don't have to go through. So you can see the imbalance there and how we manage these difficult times. So what are we doing about this going forward? And this is the part that maybe has a little hope to it. Try to end on a higher note. One of the items we have within our contract is a mechanism. It's called the materials allowance. You can bring me the invoice for that product that you don't need for a period of time, say a year from now. I will pay that invoice. And then when you actually build that work in the project, I will credit that off of what I pay you to actually build it. So let me put some skin to that. If you were to go buy beams today, say steel beams, you could get a price. They told you they'd hold it for 90 days. You run to us and say, I want a materials allowance for these beams. Show me it's stored in a safe place. Show me it meets all of our specifications. Show me the invoice. We will pay you that. And then when you go and build that bridge, that portion of that line item has already been paid for, will be credited out. We're encouraging that. One of the challenges that folks will tell us is, where do we have to store it? Look at our limited right-of-way. It's not necessarily advantageous to suggest. There are places that people can do it off-site. We allow that. Certain security measures in place. We're being as favorable as we can. But another item that's really something we use probably foremost immediately following Hurricane Katrina. It's called indexing. And so indexing is a concept for us. Essentially, you establish a base price the month you bid a project, and we're going to use 100. So if you bid a project for me on Friday, and it's 100, I'm asking you to take the swing 5% in each direction. So at up to 105, you pay that increased cost. Down to 95, you get the goodie out of that reduction in price. I'll stick with that side. If it goes under 95, I share in that savings that comes off of that index. You didn't pay as much, I shouldn't pay as much. go the other direction. Above the 105, I'm going to participate in that amount to a point. We have to cap that. We can't really just run an open checking account on this. So we have caps on things. We've done this for asphalt, cement, and we still do that today. We have once done it on fuel, and we're trying to watch. We're looking at the market ourselves. It's very hard when you're a hard hat engineer and you become an economist, and you try to choose these things. But we're trying to look at fuel indexing. Is that something that's really needed? It's hard to know right now. But steel index is something that has quickly emerged as something we need to really strongly consider. And so when we look at steel index, there are things that are very easy. You can do them by the pound. It's a direct correlation. And there's elements, let's stick with that concrete pipe, where the steel is just a small portion of that pipe. So I have to factor out what amount of that am I really indexing. I have to get rid of the labor. I have to get rid of the concrete pieces and elements of it and strip it down to just the steel. And then we'll watch that market go over time and participate. So we're looking at these things as avenues to really, to change behavior, if you will. I can't eliminate someone taking risk, and nor is that my position to do so. But I would like to influence pricing things out of fear. And so that leads me to the last bullet. As we look at some of these items that are either going to have a long delivery time on them, or they don't have an urgency to them, is probably the thing to focus on. We may have to look at shifting them around a little bit. I'll share with you, let me make a point on resurfacing. I led with that. Let me say this. We typically do not index resurfacing projects. There's something that is done within a year's time. So you shoulder the risk as a contractor for that 1 year's market swing. Well, in this scenario, we really can't. We're seeing liquid asphalt cement monthly increases of 10, 20, 30%. And so those contractors are bidding work that if they can't jump out and get it, they're going to see if they can't find a time when it's more advantageous to pursue. Well, we want that work done. So we've several projects we have indexed, resurfacing projects as a group, so that they can proceed with that work. But we still have that tough conversation internally. Can some of that resurfacing wait? Should we look at pushing it off a ways? So those are the things that are thoughtful and measured on our part to recognize how can we influence this. It's very challenging. We're not alone. In addition to talking to the construction community and their associations, we have a strong network with our SASHTO partners, and then nationally with the other ASHTO members. We've had several calls quarterly, I'd say, in fact, on some of these issues. What are other states doing? We're in lockstep with most everybody else's solutions. We're probably a little more, we're in some ways, we're a little more measured as we look at our program. We do have things we think we can adjust in terms of letting schedules. But it's a very real problem. It's a national problem. It's not just a Georgia problem. And it's important to come before you, if nothing else, to set expectations and give you the opportunity to understand that Albert may come up in the coming months and tell you there's a number of projects rejected. You simply can't afford them. They simply have gone beyond what we estimate. They may go beyond what we think is the right value at the right time. So it's a little bit of a challenging moment for us, but we have a lot of effort to really try to, again, influence that fear pricing, those elements of compounding cost. If we can do that through indexing, we can do that through how we let things schedule-wise, that's going to pay dividends to us. But it's, again, if I could have proceeded, Paul, you would have ended with all that love and affection, and I get nothing. But no, I wanted to, again, appreciate the opportunity to share that with you. It's important to understand, again, and in all seriousness, there will be some tough conversations ahead. There sure will.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions. Ms. Lemon?
So, Mark, I appreciate that update, because I will share with you that there are some projects out there that are not being done that I was greatly concerned about. Now, I've had some tough conversations with my district engineers about allowing the contractors to linger on these projects and not doing liquidated damages and not pressing them to get the projects done. So I appreciate this presentation. I guess it'll take some stress off of them now that I'll stop calling them. But my only concern is that we're across the board using the same level of grace, if you will, not just with the larger contractors,
Right.
but across the board, the smaller contractors. Everybody's getting the same favor and the same grace, regardless of the size of the work that they're doing. Because I can see how we might not be doing that, depending on what district you're located in.
And that's a good point, and it brings up something else I failed to mention. So we have looked at relaxing some contract times in terms of, we set a very restrictive schedule in terms of you must work at night. Well, is there any chance to work at certain hours of the day? Can we squeeze that in? Can we allow that? Where it's cement disruption and ready-mix suppliers, there really is a chorus of voices out there saying, I can't get drivers at night. They won't drive. They won't do it. And that's not just a ready-mix thing. There's actually, that goes all the way down to rail cars. I apologize for this, but it's important for you to understand. So in the southern part of the state, we obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but we don't have granite stone in abundance to quarry, right? So we do get materials shipped out of Florida. Those go over on a rail car. They head from Florida, from Northwest Florida, they head over towards the coast. Currently, there are issues with the availability of rail cars and people to operate the train. And it's not a matter of money. That doesn't change it. If they don't have it, it's not coming. And then when it does arrive, it's already been claimed. So we're looking at relaxing hours to make it, you know, again, if it's advantageous to get the work done, we want to look at that. It's very unique times. But to your point, yes, evenly applied.
Okay, Mr. Boswell?
One thing maybe I didn't understand on one of the slides, it was a huge disparity in cost in between districts.
Yeah.
Explain that to me.
Well, so one of the things that is baked into this is this recognizes all difficulties of work. So there's a stick of pipe that I can put in the ground pretty easily. I can take a piece of equipment, dig it out, make a bed for it, and compact it and put it in place. There's another place I have to put pipe in the ground where I have to get a metal structure, a box to work in for safety, and I have a very different production rate. So there's potential those are
soils.
Yeah, right. So there's potential that those
structure
are
and
just,
things of that nature.
Yes, sir. Potential is different in what it was, but yes, it is interesting to see those districts broke out the way they are. And
it was a great disparity.
Yeah, there is, but some of that is simply going to be, again, how small of a project, how large, or sometimes an economy of scale to enjoy, and the inverse is true also.
Okay, Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mark, for this presentation. It's really, really neat to hear this and how it's impacting us. To that end, I know over the past several years, we've had a number of discussions regarding different materials and alternate materials that can be used, and I know some of those materials are still being tested and vetted through our testing lab. What, if any, impact may the testing have on alternate materials as it relates to this? Because it would seem like that there would be more of an urgent need to look more diligently or more thorough at that stuff, if that can help alleviate some of these supply and material issues.
Yeah, and that's a great point. There are some items that might be possible. Some of these items, like quarried stone, there's nothing really new to learn there. Cement availability, but specific products, let's say someone has designed a different type of pipe, somehow differently, either a composition or therefore, we as an agency have to look at service life. We take very seriously that field testing to understand, we take a 2-year window to think about a 50-year service. That's still a pretty hefty gamble. But yeah, to your point, I don't know that we're quite there, but I think it's a fair question to raise for us to look into what's on file.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Commissioner?
Thank you. I'll take responsibility for the order of the presentation of the committee of the whole, since that Mark, sorry to leave on all seriousness, but it was very important that we share with you what we're seeing. This is not unique to Georgia, as Mark said. This is all the states. So we've been on the phone with them and trying to understand how do we advance critical transportation projects, being very accountable and transparent and efficient use of taxpayer dollars. And so we take this very seriously. Mark mentioned our engineering services. Every time we award bids, it's because we've done engineer's estimate at that time, at that project, at that location, to make sure that we have very responsible bids that we move forward with when after the board approves bidding the projects out before we make an award. So we take that very seriously. So we just thought it's important to keep you apprised of the market stress that's out there, the challenges that really exist, not only in this industry, among others, but it's important that we keep Georgia's transportation moving forward among all these things, and keeping our partners, our contractors, suppliers, vendors, and to Ms. Lemon's point, our biggest concerns are the small business, DBEs and small business that don't have the wherewithal, the capability to weather some really high market volatility. And to that point, the director of the state construction engineer sent a memo to all districts to articulate what Mark did. So the message has been sent across the entire state of how to work with contractors when evaluating either work hours or extension of time. And I know we have media in the audience. We're not trying to prolong or impede traffic or the difficulty through construction work zones, but we do have to try to find a balance that we can be responsive to making sure these projects get built. One point I wanted to share with you on the index where we're likely to head and continue to expand comes with an accounting exercise that's very important for you to understand as well. In the fact that whenever Mark gave you sort of the exposure of we can't have uncapped liability when we enter into a contract. So on the asphalt cement, there's a 60% limit. So with an increase of more than 60%, that's where it's capped. But when we contract for that, we have to budget for that, encumber that money, and include it into the contract when it's executed. So that means that I apologize. That means that we're encumbering money that may not be used, could be used, but it's encumbered, as Paul Denard in his presentation said, hey, we're really trying to close out our construction projects faster. Those dollars stay encumbered until that project is finished. Not only is the work finished, but all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So the more we index takes away the buying capacity of our budget, if you will. And so there's these trade-offs and deliberations that we have to continue to do to strike the right balance to keep moving forward on the infrastructure projects that we need to accomplish, but also try to find the balance that it's a reasonable thing. I'll leave you with my last comparison, and Mark, I can't believe you didn't talk about the deck. This is my example I've been using. During COVID, I had a good friend that when COVID first hit, he had a lot of idle time. He said, I'll just redo my deck while I'm homebound. And as we all did, everybody went to Home Depot and Lowe's, and lumber prices went sky high, supply chain again, right? And he decided once he priced what it cost to redo his deck that he didn't enjoy his deck that much. So he just deferred redoing his deck till the lumber prices became more favorable. And that's exactly safety we can't delay. Every project we do has an inherent safety benefit. So we're trying to give that fair consideration, and to be candid, we have shifted some of the resurfacing that we plan to advertise for bid this summer. We've cascaded it into the fall, hoping that petroleum continues to the barrel of oil price hopefully continues to decline, and we'll have more favorable pricing so that contractors don't bid that risk that they can't control, even with an index that we will add to those projects. But, sort of like, the whole stock adage, buy low, sell high. right now we're buying high. And so, we're just trying to find the correct balance. But, certainly welcome your comments, feedback as you get out and about. And I'm sure some suppliers, contractors, or vendors will call you and share their real world stories, that we know to be true, and how we vet through this. And we'll continue to work with our states, in lessons learned that they may be doing, in and around. I know, South Carolina's talking about a steel index. North Carolina's done that. So, we're trying to, again, contractors work state to state, so we try to be consistent among states even. So, for that point of view. But, Madam Chair, that's what I wanted to share. And, the only other item, as I went back, I do want to commend Dana, for probably the most tenured, construction project of State Route 92 in Douglasville. When she threw her hands up, I agree, a very complicated, difficult project. Not only, I give Dana credit from the planning point of view, going all the way back to community engagement to the planning to get to this great state today that you can drive under the railroad no matter if the train's coming or not, in a really major mobility corridor for 92, which goes on up into Jerry's district, and a major corridor there ends up over in Jeff's district. So, great. I just wanted to, again, say thank you to her for a lot of community engagement. And it's not over. We still got to finish every little detail out there, but, a major victory there. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And we do have some love for you, but we're feeling your pain as well. So,
That's all I can ask for.
but I would tell you, I look back on what we've heard today, and people, I think, in general, don't understand or appreciate the complexity of this organization. We have heard stark stories today from everything from the legislative to the budget and every bit of it's so important. And it's from the ground up. And so we appreciate the work that you do. We're here to support you, but thank you for all the good reports today. And Mark, like I said, we're feeling your pain, but we love you no matter what. So
I'm going to go high five Paul.
Okay. Well, and with that, we are adjourned for the day, and I will see everyone first thing in the morning. Thank you.